everyone. Welcome back to the Soldiers of Cinema podcast. I am Cullen McFader, joined as always by Clark Coffee, and I want to begin with a piece of trivia to see if people can guess the movie based off of this trivia. But
based on the title of the podcast?
Based on the ignore the title of the podcast.
Okay.
I believe the reason you chose this movie is because right at the start of the movie, it pans past television, and the two teams playing basketball on the television are LA and Toronto.
It's got to be Lakers. Oh, no.
So,
is it really?
Yeah.
What? Toronto has a basketball team?
Yeah, we won. Well, I think it was the year that I came to LA we won. So
wait,
there you
go. Wait. What were you going to say? That they won something? What did they win? Like a championship?
Yeah.
No way.
We
did?
won the NBA final.
Oh my gosh. I don't know. You're coughing and I feel like you're getting all choked up. These lies.
Yeah, it was a huge embarrassment for LA to have lost to
Wait, when did this? Okay, so first of all, I have to admit, I don't keep up with basketball and professional basketball, and I haven't since Jordan retired, like for the 15th time.
Oh God, yeah.
So it's been a long time since I've kept up with pro ball. But okay, wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that's why.
Finals.
What is the name of the Toronto? Is it the Toronto Raptors?
Yes, yeah.
Oh my lord. Okay, all right.
They used to have very cool purple jerseys back in the 90s when the team started, and they've gotten rid of that, but
and that's
I
really
still yearn for those days.
Okay, and that is really the two teams that are playing in the beginning of Drive?
I thought that was why you chose this, so.
Well, I'm just sure it is. Yes, it is. That's exactly why I chose it. So my choice was Drive.
If I drive for you,
you give me a time and a place. I give you a 5-minute window.
Anything happens in that 5 minutes and I'm yours, no matter what. I don't sit in while you're running it down. I don't carry a gun. I drive.
So you just moved to LA?
No, I've been here for a while.
What do you do?
I drive for movies.
Isn't that dangerous?
It's only part-time.
You put this kid behind the wheel. There's nothing he can't do.
Kid, I want you to meet Mr. Bernie Rose.
My hands are a little dirty.
So am I.
My husband's coming home.
Where is he?
He's in prison.
There's some guys that want me to do a job for them, and I'm not gonna do it.
What is that you got there? One of those men gave you that? What's the job?
When you get your money, his debt's paid. You never go near his family again.
Did you have any idea there'd be a second car?
He said there would be another car to hold us up.
Whose money do I have?
I'm gonna tell you something. Anybody finds out, we're both dead.
That's why this driver's gotta go, Bernie. He's gotta go.
Do you remember this?
No. Any dreams you have or plans for your future, I think you're gonna have to put that on hold. For the rest of your life, you're gonna be looking over your shoulder.
And we can do that thing that we always do before we dive into the nitty-gritty, where we discuss our kind of our first viewing experiences of the film to compare and contrast. So let's start with you. Now, I know both of us had seen the film prior to us watching it again in preparation for this episode. But yeah, tell me a little bit about your first experience with the film, and just like, did you dig it at all? Did it just not connect with you? What were your thoughts, et cetera, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I mean, I remember this movie coming out very distinctly. I didn't see it when it came out, but it was like
Yeah.
it was the year before I went into high school. So
Oh my
when
gosh,
I
you're in
made
middle school.
I was in
Oh,
grade 8 in
oh,
2011.
oh my
Um,
God.
but I remember, because of that, like when I made all these friends who were also into movies and stuff, it was like all anyone would talk about. And it was,
Oh, really?
like, oh, have you seen Drive? Have you seen? Because everyone thought it was so cool, and it was like moody, and
So in your circle of friends,
yeah.
this was
And
like the hip thing.
I
Wow.
still never saw it. I didn't see it at
Okay.
all through high school. I saw it.
You're like,
I think the first time I
I'm too
probably
cool.
watched it was like 2016 or 2017.
Mm-hmm.
I remember liking it at the time. Like I remember, enjoying it. Some of my favorite older movies are like, I love Bullet, and I love like French Connection and things like that. I think both of us kind of share an affinity towards movies
Yes,
with
we do.
cars and things like that. So
With cars, yes. Movies, cinema and cars.
very
Like, how can
few
you get?
movies feature cars? But yeah, and I remember thinking that it was very good. I didn't know Refn too well. Like I knew of his other work because at that point he'd done I think Only God Forgives, and
No,
I
not
don't
yet.
remember when. Yeah, or yeah, what
Yeah.
was Only God Forgives was
So
what?
so Only God Forgives was released in 2013, so a couple years after Drive.
Yeah,
But
so
he
when I saw,
definitely
yeah.
had. Right. So since you didn't see it at the theater, though, it sounds
Mhm.
like Only God Forgives could have totally been released, and so you
Yeah.
might have been
Yeah,
aware of that
I would have
film
seen
before
it
you even
probably,
saw
yeah.
Drive. Yeah.
I would have seen this probably, 2017-ish. So I
Yeah.
think I
Yeah.
knew of him. I still hadn't seen it. It was the first of his movies that I'd seen.
Yeah.
But I knew, like, at that point he'd kind of gotten this reputation, or like he'd kind of made a name for himself as this guy who does these like kind of colored, like, neon,
The neon
um,
noir kind of thing.
exactly, like this kind of
Yeah.
neo noir. And so yeah, I kind of knew vaguely what to expect, and I'd seen, like, this movie always popped up on like best of lists, or like cinematography tutorials, things like that. It always just kind of popped up there because it has a very distinct look.
And then, like,
Um,
whenever that really wonderful YouTube essay series, Every Frame a Painting,
Yes, yeah.
they released I think like a smaller, little quick segment on Drive
Yeah,
as
who just
well.
released his first new video in like 10 years or something the other
I'll
day.
have to go
Yeah,
back
he's
and
back.
check because oh wow, okay,
I think they're doing like a limited series of new videos. But
very cool.
alas, yeah. So I remember seeing the movie and thinking that it was, I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
It has, again, like a very specific style. I think that it's not necessarily the style that I usually enjoy in movies, and I think that there's been a lot of, for lack of a better term, homage paid to this movie. Like I think it really did set a trend for a while.
You're being kind, yeah.
And I think that kind of also might have influenced my viewing of it, because it's like going back and watching a movie that starts any trend, and it weirdly has this sense of being cliched, but it's not, because it when it invented,
It started the
whatever.
cliche, yeah.
But no, I do, like, I think that it definitely, I think, rises above all those things. Like I think the movie
Okay.
itself really works. It's got a very, very light, simple, like, story. Like I think that
Yep.
also really works in its favor, is that
Yep.
it's much more about the kind of vibe and the moodiness and the
Agreed.
like the aesthetic of it all
Tone.
over the exactly, the tone of it over the specific plot points that it's got hit. So I think I enjoyed that.
If I'm reading the tea leaves here, if I'm like sifting through the tea leaves of your description of your viewing, if I had to put a number where 0 means you'd rather vomit and then eat your own vomit versus see the film again, or 10, you just die and go to heaven after you saw the film, it was that good, it feels like what you're telling me is that you would give this film a 6 or 7. Am I close?
I'd say probably like a 7, a high 7.
Okay.
So,
All right. So it's not like the greatest thing since sliced bread for you, but it's not horrible. You enjoyed it. Okay.
Yeah, no,
Well,
I actually, like, I even last night watching it, for the first time, rewatch in,
Mhm.
probably 8 years. yeah, like I remember wondering sort of when you chose the movie if I was gonna go into this and that the kind of trend and the cliche of it all would affect me in a worse way on this viewing because now we're so many more years out.
So many years out. Yep.
But I think that I actually enjoyed it more last night watching it than I did the first time I watched it. Like I think knowing kind of what to expect of it
And it sounds
appreciating a
like you
lot
were
more.
so young. I mean, and
Yeah.
not to say that you can't appreciate films when you're young, but I think no matter how old you are on a first viewing of a film, when a decade or more passes, you're a different person. Right? I mean, your life experiences are so substantially different, right? Have been added to by that time. So, I mean, I've definitely had experiences where I watched a film and then watched it a decade later, and my experience that second time is really profoundly different in a lot of instances. But well, I'm gonna try to convince you that this is a greater than a 7 film.
Yes,
We'll
yeah.
see if I can do that. Well, I don't remember exactly when I saw the film. It was much closer to its release date, but I didn't see it at the theater, and I can't remember kind of why I didn't or what was going. I almost certainly I saw it. Yeah, I can't even. Definitely saw it at home, but maybe it was probably like on, some streaming service or something at that point. Although I don't think it's really available anymore. Streaming, it's kind of like I don't know what the right situation is with the film.
It's on
So who
Prime
knows?
here, but yeah, I'm not sure
Yeah,
what it's
I
like in
don't
the
think
US. Yeah.
gosh, and I can't, I just can't recall. So I mean, I definitely have the physical media. I had the Blu-ray, so it might have just been that I bought the Blu-ray, a year or so after it was released theatrically and watched it that way. And then for this episode, now I have the UK UHD release, and that's how I watched it this time. But I remember being very impressed with the film on my first viewing and then like subsequent several viewings. I was not familiar really at all with Refn. I don't think I knew who he was at all. And I was like vaguely familiar with Gosling, but I don't think any of his films that were before this, like The Notebook and Half Nelson, and they just they didn't seem to speak to me, so I didn't go out of my way to see them. I hadn't seen any of his films. He wasn't like the huge megastar that he is now, and just I think those films kind of fell within a genre, or I thought that they were in some genres that just weren't immediately interesting to me. I don't think I've still not seen those films. I have seen Lars and the Real Girl, and that actually is I like that film very much, and I think that was one of the other films that was released either right before this film or maybe near this film. I can't remember exactly, but so I'm going into it really, I think Albert Brooks, Ron Perlman, I knew who they were. And then I think it's Christina Hendricks. I knew who she was because I was a big fan of Mad Men, the TV show, and had been watching that. And I'm a really, really big fan of Albert Brooks. I
Me too.
absolutely love Albert Brooks. And I think he steals the film personally. I absolutely love him. I think he is fantastic in this. So that was kind of when I was like, oh, Albert Brooks is he plays a bad guy. Ooh. So that was kind of, I think before I actually had sit down to watch it, like that's the thing I was really excited to see. But I think this film, it's kind of the more that I kind of think about cinema and what it like, because I feel like we're in this era, right, where we've got this so-called thing that's titled cinema. What is that? I wonder, right? The theatrical experience is kind of like fading away for a lot of audiences. People are watching everything on the television at home, and even more, especially younger people, they're watching it on their iPad or even their phone.
Yeah, they don't even have TVs. Yeah,
and it's YouTube. Yeah, they don't even have. Right, they may not, and that's where I'm really kind of aging myself out of that. It's like I can't even fathom that. and it's probably like like my parents or older people being like, how can you not have a landline phone,
Yes,
you know what I
yeah.
mean? It's almost like, well, how could you not have a television? You're like, well, I watch it on my phone or my iPad or my computer monitor or whatever. um and so so as I'm like kind of wondering, like, well, what really is cinema? What really, like, where does the 90-minute to 2.5 hour moving picture format, like, how can it kind of define itself and be successful outside of extended series streaming, or quote unquote TV shows that are streaming, or TikTok videos or YouTube videos? And I think that in watching this film, it kind of reminds me of where I think cinema really excels. Like, where did what because even the name film, right? Well, most films aren't shot on film; they're shot digitally. So it's like all these ways that we used to kind of define cinema it's kind of this very fluid situation that we're in. And I think watching Drive, it reminds me that I think where cinema really excels in this hour and a half to 2 hour, 2.5 hour long length, I kind of, the word like tone poem kind of comes to mind. I think that it's a director led medium. It's not a writer led medium. I think it's more than even like the focus of visual storytelling. I think it's really about simple plot. It's like I keep in my mind, I think of like haiku. Like, this film feels like a haiku to me, and it feels so successful in that as a tone poem, as a haiku. There's, like you said, it's a very, very simple story. It's not trying to be complicated, but it's so successful and effective at bringing you into this world where there's this tone, there's this vibe, there's this, and it's just exceptional with that. The way it's shot, the way it's acted, the performances, dialogue, this cool ass synthwave soundtrack. And as opposed
which has gone on to have a life of its own too. Like, these songs in this movie appear everywhere now.
Everywhere, yeah. And maybe I'm like out of the loop. I'm sure synthwave was a thing before this film, but this film kind of made me really aware of synthwave as like a whole kind of genre of music. But yeah, I guess to me, this is a great example of a film that is supremely successful at creating a vibe and a tone and putting you in this like cocoon of that vibe. And I feel like, at least for me, this is one example of several that we've, I think Drugstore Cowboy was one, My Own Private Idaho, Barfly, a lot of films that I've chosen here. If I think about it and look back, I think that's what I really enjoy about cinema. And if I want something different, like a television show where it's a writers driven medium, and it's all about plot and plot mechanizations and what's happening, and trying to make it all complicated, and there's all this plot going on. I don't know. This is what I love about cinema.
Well,
and
I think
that's and that's why I kind of chose it, because I felt like it was such a good example of that.
And I think it's a really, to expand outwards too, like 2011 is a very interesting year to me for movies, because as you described, this is like a tone poem, and there was a lot of movies kind of like that came out. You have you have
What
Melancholia by Lars von Trier, you had Tree of Life by Malick.
Wait, those came out in 2011?
They were all 2011.
Okay, wow.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because you've also got...
Wait, don't forget Hangover Part 2.
Oh,
also
Hangover
came
Part
out
2, of course,
in 2011.
I did see in theaters.
I auditioned for that film, by the way. That's a whole other story. That's a whole other story. Yeah.
But then you've got, you also have, like, this is a very specific year for me as well, because it is the year that I remember seeing the last movie project at like a multiplex big, cinema on
like at
film.
the mall or something. Or
yeah, like it was the year that switched over, and I remember the last movie I ever saw on film at a a large multiplex was Battle Los Angeles, which was probably not a great movie to go out
my.
on. And obviously, you know, I've seen movies on film since then. There's plenty
Sure.
of like rep screenings and things like that
Yep.
do it. But in terms of mainstream, big, you know, new movie that's out just in a general cinema, yeah. And so it is a very fascinating, it almost, unfortunately, like a year like 2011 is almost unrecognizable in terms of these movies that were coming out in theaters that were being, you know, had large marketing budgets that weren't, you know, this is obviously Netflix existed at this point, but it wasn't a, you know, wasn't a household name as it is now. I don't think they'd even started making their own stuff yet.
Yeah, it wasn't a production. It wasn't a studio, I don't think.
No,
or not significantly at this time.
Like, House of Cards was their first major original thing, and I don't think that had started yet. I might be wrong, but yeah, and so it's like it almost is a completely foreign environment for the medium here. When this came out, and you know, even to think about this movie and to, again, like you described, it's just kind of a tone poem. I almost see perhaps a positive element of it is I almost see movies like this coming back. Like, I can see there's been recent releases that do kind of take their time, and obviously these things never like totally went away, but I mean in sort of the mainstream zeitgeist of like discussion and what people are talking about and things that do well. You know, any year you can find a movie that was relegated to some, you know, backwater streaming service that's probably great. But it is like, it is an interesting time, and it's a very interesting movie because I think it really encapsulates that kind of final, I don't know, there seems to be a finality to it in a weird way. Like, it's kind of melancholic for me because it seems like this was the last sort of few years when this movie was made that a movie like this could have a big release in the theaters and, you know, actually be talked about and do well at the box office. And
yeah, I'm usually, you know, you know, I would usually be lending my voice to your lament, and I'd say, you know, but to play devil's advocate, I mean, even in 2011, you had, I mean, these are the top films box office for 2011. Okay, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. So this is like
small indie film.
Small indie film. It was one of a series of, I think, 107 films that people hardly knew. You know, Transformers: Dark of the Moon, Twilight Saga, Breaking Dawn Part 1, our previously mentioned Hangover Part 2, Pirates of the Caribbean, On Stranger Tides, Fast 5, Mission Impossible, Ghost Protocol. So it's like all of the top films of that era, none of them, they were all like IP stuff.
Of course, yeah.
They're all, sequels of a long series of films. Even Hangover Part 2 is a sequel of a, you know, that kind of became an IP. It's like rare that a comedy does that. But I mean, you know, so it's like all those films are basically what's still happening today, right?
Yeah.
Now, I hear what you're saying. You're saying that in spite of that, films like this found their way into a relatively wide release theatrically. And I feel like maybe some of that's coming back, and maybe it's more limited to genre films. We have kind of like Blumhouse or A24, especially nowadays. And they're getting films that are released in theaters fairly widely that are, you know, definitely director driven and have a very distinct voice and opinion and style. So it's good to see that happening. So I don't know. I just, you know, not that I'm even arguing or debating your point, just adding a little bit to it here, you know. Yeah.
And I think that the like specific thing too is that it would be so much easier for a movie like Drive today. Like it would almost be a guarantee that it would go to a festival and a streaming service would pick it up because it would be that would be an easier path of distribution.
Sure.
You know, like I was at we're recording this in September, and I was at a theater recently to see like a regular movie theater to see a movie, and there's actually a lot of good movies I think out in theaters right now. But I remember walking into the movie theater and seeing like 9 out of the 10 screens at this theater were Deadpool versus Wolverine. Like it was every other movie was or every other screen except for this one screen that was showing the movie that I was there to see.
Right.
And I think that's the difference. So you had all these big movies, you had Harry Potter, you had Twilight, you had all that stuff. But, you know, and even if they were showing on multiple screens at these multiplexes, you still had such a variety of things. Whereas it seems like nowadays it's like you get a golden nugget of a smaller or like a drama or a thriller or something that comes out and it's does well and it's able to get that theatrical release, but it is really like a golden nugget. Like it's really like a diamond in the rough of everything else. Whereas this day and age, I feel like you could go to the movie, or back in 2011, I mean, you could go and Transformers would be playing, Harry Potter would be playing, but you'd also have so much variety in what you could actually see there. Perhaps I'm turning into the old man that yells at the cloud, but I do think that to get into the actual specifics of the movie, like it does really, I don't know, it kind of makes me feel like Ryan Gosling driving around at midnight and kind of going like lamenting the times past and what have I lost and what have I what do I desire in the world and all these things. So yeah, but I think it's a super interesting era of filmmaking. I think that this movie is really, it really does, like, I think, again, perhaps to get into the details of it now, like
let's get into the details.
Yeah.
I think, I want to revisit, you'd mentioned, and I had, this totally escaped me. You talked about Toronto and LA being on the television. I want to go back to that first scene and kind of use that as a way to explore, I think, all of the greatest strengths, I think, in this film, because I think almost all of them are a part of this first scene. Right off the bat, I think we have a really memorable and extraordinary introduction to our character. And what I love about it is that, just like some of the other films that are some of my favorites, like the Mad Max films, and especially I'm thinking of Mad Max 1, I feel like this is very similar in the way that character is shown to us by his ability and behavior, not through talking or telling, but through showing. And I know we say this over and over, and it's like a crazy cliche, but the reality is that a lot of times, and especially with this huge amount of content that we see television, especially, it's a lot of telling and not a lot of showing. So I just think this is a great example of super efficient, right? Super efficient. We're introduced to the character of Driver, and we see through his abilities kind of, who he is as a character right off the bat. And we're also introduced, if I'm not mistaken, to his boss, right? The Bryan Cranston's character, right? Who puts together, right? And I love all these little touches where it's like, okay, he's in his tiny room, right? We open up, like you said, there's the TV playing the game. So we're introduced to that, and there's going to be a nice little payoff for that. And it's just a little thing, but there's a really nice payoff to that. It's very elegantly woven into this first scene. We see that this guy lives a very frugal life. He's in like this alone in this studio apartment. Perfect. We see that he's like no nonsense, down to business. It's like, look, you get 5 minutes or whatever, you know what I mean? And you'll never be able to get me on this phone again. Boom. It's like we know he's got his rules. Like these are his rules for successful, getaway. And then he goes to Cranston's shop, and he's got this like super vanilla, totally boring, like Chevy Malibu that he picks up, but that's been modified to have more horsepower in it. So it's like all these little steps I think are just great. And then we've got, I'm just a sucker for LA nighttime photography. What can I say? I'm a sucker for it. So, but we see then through this whole interaction of him, being at the burglary site, and then, escaping capture from the police a couple times, and then pulling right into the arena whenever the basketball game is over, so that they can get lost in the mess of all the crowd coming out. He just parks his car in the garage and walks away. It's just, and I think there's not that much action. It's not really like, there's a little couple seconds of chasey kind of stuff, but it's really about suspense. It's almost how I might even think, like, I don't know if Hitchcock, but it's just such a emphasis on suspense and allowing us to kind of just see the character through the decisions they make and their behavior. It's just such a brilliant scene and such a wonderful introduction.
It feels very, like, I think even beyond Hitchcock, it feels very like 60s thriller. Just those silent moments of staring across the intersection at the cop and hearing that, like, those kind of really, it harks back to again, unsurprisingly, like things like Bullet or things like
where you're like
French Connection.
McQueen is just hands on the wheel, kind of looking over the dashboard. He's got the toothpick in the mouth,
toothpick is,
right? Yeah, absolutely. And you get and that character of Driver is, I mean, just everything from the fact that he's got no name. We really don't know anything about this person's history at all. I mean, it's basically Eastwood, the man with no name. I mean, that's basically, this character has been used over and over and over and over, this kind of characterization, because anybody can put themselves in this almost, kind of empty shell of a character. But I thought that was so brilliant. And of course, the music here, too, is just, the soundtrack is so effective. And like I said, I don't know. I mean, maybe you were aware of like synthwave. I'm not super cool. I'm old already. But I was like, whoa, what is all this? The soundtrack stuff's amazing. Because I'm not a big fan of like electronic music at all. But synthwave is like cool as hell to me. I still dig it. All these like decade plus later. Mm-hmm. Was that a thing? Like as a young kid who's like hip, you're like really like tied into all the like latest trends.
Let's not go that far. No, I mean, it definitely. I mean, again, it was always like it was a niche, but I think, like thinking back to even just how social media was back then, and like
what was social media? Was 2011? What would it
like
have been?
YouTube was like huge
early
then,
Facebook,
and it was probably still Facebook, and like kind of Instagram was starting to kind of come in as big. Twitter was there, but not huge. But I remember, like, again, I remember the soundtrack for this movie being used in like every YouTube short film and the color grade and all that. Like, it was even things that were like completely unrelated. It was like, oh, my day at the beach, and it would be like, bow, 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 So it was like, I actually made a parody when I was a camp counselor with my campers. I like, we were doing film styles, kind of a short day of different genres and directors and things like that. And
I love it.
We did one called Walk, and it was literally just like very, kind of locked off, well framed shots of the kids walking across the camp to that song, and just like and you made me think of something, because you said like my day at the beach, and you know what it made me almost think of? It almost made me think like paralleling this film to not every episode, but very specifically the pilot episode that was, I don't know if Michael Mann directed it, and but the pilot episode of the original Miami Vice. Yes, with In the Air Tonight. Or is that a later? That's a later.
No, that's correct. No.
Oh, it is. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I'm almost certain that infamous, not infamous, a famous scene of Phil Collins in the Air Tonight is playing and they've got the cameras like attached to, they've got the Ferrari, and it's got all the like wheel seat, and that kind of vibe, and they're just like, and Sonny and Crockett are in the driver's seat, the top's down, and they're just like not saying a word, and they're just kind of like looking down the road, and it's the da-dun, that kind of vibe, I feel like, is what I get.
Well, yeah, and it definitely blew up. Like, from, I think, again, this movie definitely brought back a lot of that, because it
wasn't directed by Michael Mann. Just FYI, I just want to. I just real quick, sorry, but yeah, Thomas Carter actually directed, but Mann, of course,
Mann was the showrunner and all that. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so sorry. So please continue.
But yeah, and you look back even at something like Grand Theft Auto 5, which would have come out 2 years. I think it was 2013 when that game came out. And a lot of that, again, like the synthwave stuff you're talking about, like just in the trailers where it's using that kind of like synthy, vibey music, showing LA at night. Like, I think that this kind of ushered in that kind of new era, even to the degree that, God, how many like album covers back then would use that, like that electronic grid look, and it would be like, it would look like the grid was going way out in the sky, and then purple like neon writing at the top and stars or whatever. And I think that this movie was very much, if not partial, like majorly responsible for bringing that back, because it did become this like I remember people buying the jacket that Ryan Gosling wears in this movie. People still wear it, and I think it's.
Are you serious?
Yeah, maybe a bit embarrassing, but
wow.
But I remember people bought, and that like there's this joke online that Ryan Gosling in this movie is like literally me. People say that thing. It's like, he's literally me, and so there's definitely it kind of ushered in that aesthetic again of like where
But let's talk about that. I mean, we can laugh, and it is kind of a funny meme. Like, this is literally me. But I think I do think that and I think if somehow spaghetti westerns were like a modern thing, they'd never been released before, and you had a young Clint Eastwood, right, just released like Fistful of Dollars, I think you would have people being like, that's literally me. And I think the reason why these characters are so kind of like prone to have that kind of response from an audience to some extent is, again, it's because they are so open to interpretation. There's so little dialogue slate, from this. They're blank slate kind of things. And that's not, and look, does every lead character need to be like that? Of course not. There's so many different ways that you can approach it. But for this kind of film, I mean, I think that's, it's very, very easy for somebody to kind of put themselves into this because, like you said, he's a blank slate. And it's kind of like right at the so after we kind of see him, doing the driver thing here, the getaway driver for the burglars. Now we kind of see what's going to become really something that propels the rest of the film, which is this kind of, I don't know if it's definitely not a sexual relationship, but it is some kind of romantic, kind of unrequited, kind of could never be kind of relationship between driver and I'm gonna forget her name, but it is Carey Mulligan's character.
Yes.
And
her son,
and so that kind of propels us through the rest of the film. And it's interesting. I mean, what are your thoughts on this? Because I'm trying to kind of like wrap my head around or articulate. I mean, it's not a romantic relationship in any kind of like in the truest of senses, right? It's almost this like, because it's a relationship that's never consummated. It's a relationship that never even goes anywhere or has anything happen to it. It's like basically
they kiss that one time in the elevator.
They have one kiss, and they don't spend much time together. But it's interesting that it's enough to propel the film. It's enough for us to kind of develop some feeling for these characters. And again, I guess that's why I go back to, it just feels so much like a tone poem. There's just enough there that we kind of can fill in the blanks. We can kind of push into these characters our own experiences and wants and desires and fears. But yeah, it's amazing to me. And I think of other films where there are so many instances of films, and I'm curious about your thought on this, and maybe we can think of just off the top of our head some examples, or maybe not, but I don't know. There's so many films where the heart of the film is this romantic relationship. And time again, I'm left thinking, well, how in the hell could these characters like have feelings for each other? They've like just met, or they hardly know each other, or you know what I mean? Like it seems so rushed and it seems so forced. And I see this time and time again. But for some reason, it just doesn't feel like that here. What are your thoughts? I mean, do you feel similarly, or do you have a totally different?
Yeah, I think that it's the kind of I think that Gosling is playing like an archetype in this movie of this kind of like
for sure,
almost stoic, silent defender of he is consistently, despite the fact that he obviously is working in kind of a criminal career, he's consistently shown to almost be doing that because it's like the thing that he's good at, not because he has some sort of ulterior motive for money or anything
he's clearly
like that,
not
right?
malicious.
Like
he's clearly not malicious.
I mean, even he helps out.
He's not greedy.
Yeah, he helps out Irene, I think is Carey Mulligan's character's name. He helps out her husband, played by Oscar Isaac,
who's just come back from prison
for goodwill. Like, and he is in love with his. It's never explicitly, but it's fairly clear that Ryan Gosling has, or the driver has, these feelings towards Irene, and yet he's still, because it's better for her,
and her
he's
son,
willing to help her husband get out of the trouble that he's in. And so
I
think that it's one of those things though that where it's like a person on the verge of crying is always going to be more interesting than a person crying. A person walking as quickly as they can but not running is almost always more interesting than someone just running. And so I think that getting to that level of
Wait,
tension,
so you're saying if Tom Cruise
speed walks
instead
through
of running in his next film, if he's speed walked away from the bad guy, right? Like just imagine, or like
Olympic
towards
style,
the, like,
Olympic style.
If there were a way that we could get to Tom, our idea. No, I think you're onto something. But
this is an open call. Tom Cruise, come on the podcast and we can talk about it.
Yep. but I hear what you're saying. It's the restraint, or it's that place between, it's that place between like an over indulgent, saccharine, melodramatic, right? It's kind of. And
I mean, I love melodrama. Like I love a lot of 40s romance movies that are very melodramatic. I think that those are great. But I think that is the thing that works for this movie, is that it really does set up its margins in the tone and never goes outside of those margins. And I think that really works for it, because it's like, okay, Ryan Gosling probably has like 10 audible lines of dialogue in this movie. Like in those lines, he's not giving much detail or information. It's really about the tone of his character that is being expressed through those lines.
It's not exposition. It's not.
And like even the car chases are quite, they're restrained in a sense, and the action is restrained, and the camera movement is restrained, and the dialogue is restrained. And so I think if all those other things were like that, and then the only thing that wasn't was that this romance actually blossomed and kind of bloomed and was something real, I think that would stand out. I think it would really like stick out of the movie and feel off. Whereas I think that the fact
it's restrained. And sorry, just to interject.
No worries.
And I think right, because I think that you're hitting the nail on the head, that it's an archetype, and this is kind of a fairy tale, and this is so stylized, and the relationship, of course, ultimately doesn't go anywhere, because we know that it really couldn't, and it's this tragic kind of outsider wanderer figure who's in the wasteland of their own life when we meet them, obviously, and we don't know why, but he's alone in this small apartment. He is quiet and does very little to ever explain himself, stand up for himself, defend himself, when it comes to him, right? He's taken advantage of by his boss, and he doesn't do anything about that. He doesn't care. We're even told that, we're told, and Cranston's character is like, I found this kid and I hired him for a fraction of what, I would normally pay someone. And, and obviously it's through him that Driver is even engaged in any criminal activities. And I can almost imagine that, Cranston's character kind of talked him into it. And it's not that Driver is stupid. It's just that he's it's almost that he's punishing himself, or that he is like in a position of subservience to the universe, because there's something that, we're left to wonder, but it is almost like he doesn't feel deserving. And so he's kind of in this wasteland that he's not yet come out of yet. And I feel like that's actually where we get to the very ending of the film, when he's gone through all of this, that maybe now he will come back from that wasteland, just to kind of speak, archetypically, like you've mentioned, right?
Yeah.
Kind of the hero journey thing. And we're just kind of zoomed in on this one part. And so it's not so much that there's a romantic relationship here that's going to ever be consummated, but that not to get too cheesy, but there's kind of the inciting incident of another human being, or actually a couple of human beings that he cares about, that kind of brings him back to consciousness. I don't know, just a thought.
Well, I think it's really appropriate that you mentioned like The Man with No Name, Clint Eastwood movies, and how that kind of fits, because if anything, this story is kind of like a smaller version of like those old westerns with Clint Eastwood. I can't remember if it's For a Fistful of Dollars or For a Few Dollars More, where he's defending the town from the bandits, the gang of bandits.
Well, I think isn't it even like the first two? Which one is the one where he
Yeah,
has like
the first one
stove,
is
where he takes the stove
yeah.
door and he
I
puts
think
it
that's
under his
for a few
poncho?
dollars more.
Yeah,
I
he's
believe.
Yeah,
And so,
yeah,
and in going back even further to the like Kurosawa's samurai movies, which obviously inspired so
totally.
many of those Western stories, like
Yeah,
this really does have that feeling of like he is the like in those movies he would be the lone stoic samurai who comes in, defends the innocent, asks nothing
and
for
then
it, and
leaves.
then moves
Yep.
on. And
Yeah.
or Mad Max, very similarly to the
Yeah.
way Mad Max wanders in and out of each movie.
Which is
Um,
almost a
and
reluctant anti-hero. Yep.
yeah, yeah, and so I think that this is, instead of a town that this character is defending, it's this family, right? Like he's asking
Mm-hmm.
nothing of the family in return.
Yep.
Obviously, he has desires. Obviously, he would love to be with Irene, and it's made very clear that when he, especially that moment in the elevator when for context, there's a mobster that's sent to basically finish the job after killing Oscar Isaac. And
Yep.
then they're in the elevator, Irene, and Driver, and then this like kind of mob enforcer whose name is never, I didn't even think, mentioned.
And this is so beautifully shot. I want to walk through this.
Yeah.
Can we walk through this scene
Yeah,
slowly?
yeah.
Let's walk through this scene slowly. So you're right. You kind of where we're at now, just as a refresher for people if you've not seen the movie in a bit. So after this first kind of getaway heist deal, we kind of show Driver noticing Irene, and there's kind of we see the relationship develop, and Oscar, Irene's husband, has just come home from prison. And basically they get in kind of a situation where he's got to do that like one more job. He like owes his employers another job. And so Oscar reels Driver in to help with this job, and ultimately it ends up being a setup, and of course it goes bad. Oscar is killed, and now Driver's got the money, and so now the mob is sending the hitman to take him out. And so now we're in the elevator in the apartment complex, and I feel like this is one of the most beautifully shot sequences in the film, and one of the most interesting usages of violence. The violence is so interestingly used here. But and I'm curious too, just because I know you come at things from like a cinematography angle a lot of times, but I thought that it was just such a beautiful small touch where we're in the elevator and we kind of go into a kind of a slow motion, and it's like the lights come down and we push
the lights come
in.
down and focus on Irene specifically as he pushes her behind him. Yeah.
Yep. And they have this kiss. And is it like a kiss, goodbye? Is it like, okay, because he knows that once he crosses this line where he smashes this guy's face in and kills him in front of her, that there can't ever really be a hope of a normal relationship. I mean, there's not going to be a normal relationship between the two of them. There's no chance of that after he violently kills, even though it's in her defense, even though it's very clear, like this guy's gonna kill them both in this elevator. We see the gun. We know what's happening. Like there's no if, ands, or buts, right, about it. It's not like a maybe. But so that's one kind of interpretation. But
yeah, I remember when I first saw it too. I thought that the kiss could have been even like almost like a ploy of distraction, and it's like I think as soon as he actually does kiss her and it moves in, I think that kind of disappears. But I remember thinking that the first time I was like, oh, he's kissing her to like, stave off the attention from that guy. But,
and you could totally, no. And you could totally read it that way. But I guess the way that it's performed from the two performers and the way that it's shot, in that it's kind of like that feeling when you're kissing someone for the first time and the world is just gone from you.
Yeah. And the lighting.
I mean, it feels so very genuine that between the two, that I feel like from Driver's perspective, this is an absolutely pure expression of his of I don't even know if love is really the word, because I mean, they don't ever
It's
have
like
any
his pent
chance.
up melancholy almost, that like he just, it's
Or
like a touching a world that he never will get to exist in, but for
yeah.
this moment. Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I guess it's like this just little like tentacle of longing that's like reaching from deep within his abyss, that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
being able to touch the outside world for a moment, um and then just the absolute like stark contrast between this really intimate, beautiful moment, and
Mm-hmm.
it just in like the blink of an eye goes from that to Driver like just smashing this guy's face, like, we even see it. I mean, it's like,
Like his head is just like
wow.
mush. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Um,
it's just that kind of stark
Well, and
contrast is
I,
just
I also just like I want to point out right after that too, as she leaves, she like backs out of the elevator, kind of shocked from
yeah,
this
yeah.
brutal violence, and it's like the one moment that we get a real authentic emotion on his face, where he turns around
Mm,
and looks at her, and I think that the fact that it is really kind of like the only moment we see him showing an emotion is very
mm-hmm.
makes it very powerful, and he's looking at her in this sort of like he looks so deeply sad that
Yeah,
this is what he has to do. Like there is a sense of I
yeah,
wish that I could have this normal life with you, and he, like you said, is in complete realization and acceptance that that's never going to happen.
yeah.
And it would be, I mean, even to move on with like the final moments of the film, when he's been stabbed, and initially we think it's a fatal mortal wound, but he ends up getting up and getting back into his car and driving off from
Well, it's
Albert Brooks. Yeah,
even more than that. I just want to let me like add a little more detail
yeah,
to that,
yeah,
because
yeah.
I think I know where you're going. I won't steal that from you, but I want to add just a little more detail, because so right at the end of the film, he's still got the money, and everybody's dead now. Like the main boss is Ron Perlman's character, has been drowned in the ocean on the beach,
Mm-hmm.
and Albert Brooks's character is the only guy left. Now, I want to put a pin in that, because I want to come back and talk about Albert Brooks' performance specifically as its own kind of topic, because I think it's just outstanding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And he's so awesome in this movie.
yeah.
But they meet up at a restaurant, and basically, Brooks is like, look, here's the deal, man. This, taking that money was a big mistake. It's pissed off the guys at the top, but here's what I can do for you. You give the money back to me. Irene and her son will be safe. That they're never going to be touched by anybody again. But I can't make that promise for you. They're going to come after you, and so you better disappear.
Mm-hmm.
And they go out to the parking lot to exchange the money. And it's interesting, because I get the sense. Now, tell me what your thoughts are on this. I get the sense that Gosling or Driver absolutely positively knows that Brooks is going to attack him,
Yeah, yeah.
but he makes himself vulnerable anyway.
Mm-hmm.
It's there's like an inevitability that this character feels so resigned to in so many ways, that it's almost in some weird way that he's like wise beyond the scope of like it's
And
almost
again, he's
like
sort of almost
when
like punishing himself in a way too. Like it's almost like you
well,
said at the
there's a
beginning,
part of
where
it.
it's like there's this
Yeah,
level of, yeah.
it's almost like he's punishing himself, but it's also too like he knows that there's no such thing as free will, and the universe is indifferent, and it's going to do what it's going to do, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm going and right, and this actually plays right into the whole idea of the scorpion and the frog, which is that we really can't fight our nature. A
Mm-hmm.
scorpion will always be a scorpion, a frog will always be a frog, and to even get upset that a scorpion stung you is ludicrous. When you
Mm-hmm.
like, that's what scorpions do. So to
Yeah.
get upset at anything the universe does is kind of ridiculous, because it's like, well, it's the universe, man. Like, this is what
Yeah.
happens. So it's interesting. Yeah, it's almost like there's a certain kind of monkish wisdom, or maybe there's a self punishment, or there's like some kind of combination of all that stuff. But I don't want to steal where you were going. So right, and so they get to the car, and Albert Brooks stabs him and tries to take the money. We have a quick kind of fight, and Driver has his own blade and wins that fight, kills Albert Brooks, and he kind
Mm-hmm.
of falls into the driver's seat of his car, and he's sitting there. And basically, and we've seen how like him get stabbed, we see all the blood, and the camera just sits on Gosling's face with his eyes open, like totally unmoving. It's amazing that Gosling was able to be so ridiculously still. Like his eyes don't even move, like the tiniest.
He looks
bit.
dead. Yeah.
Because I look like I rewound it and then they like double checked, Yeah. And I mean, it's a long period. I mean, I think we sit on it for 10 seconds at least, which is forever when you're just sitting there, And so it's like, okay, what's that? And then he blinks. Oh, he's alive. He starts up the car. And he drives away, and we see the road laid out before him over the dash. And so that's the setup. But what were you were gonna mention?
Yeah, well, I was gonna say that. So yeah, because he then drives off, leaves the money with Albert Brooks' body in the
which is
parking
key.
lot.
It was never about money.
Well, because what I was going to say too was that there's like, there's an alternate audience-pleasing ending to this movie where Ryan Gosling takes the money, goes back to Irene, and they drive off.
What?
No, I don't mean really. Like it was never shot. But I just mean hypothetically.
I was like, whoa. No. For half a second, I thought you meant there was like a deleted scene.
No. I just mean
the studio was like, we can't. No. He's got to take the money. He goes back to Irene. He's like, hey, quick,
they drive off
we
into the
gotta
sunset
go.
down the PCH.
And because he's got bench seats in his 73, what was that thing? Was it a Monte Carlo? What was his car? I know people are gonna.
I can't remember what the one he's driving. I remember his personal car is.
His personal car. It's a 73, and gosh darn it, I can't remember it. Oh, it's so horrible. But and she's like sitting next to him, on the bench seat. He's got his arm around her, and like the big, huge, duffel bag of money is like sitting in the floorboard, and the kid is in the back seat, all happy. I could see that. And
it's like even so, like some people still, because I think it can be tough to accept a sort of melancholic ending like that. Some people
Chevy
still
Malibu
are
is
convinced,
a Malibu.
Okay, yeah, it's Malibu. Yeah. They're convinced that he goes and it's like, oh yeah, like at the end when he's driving to her, and we just don't see it because it's. But no, I don't think that he's. I think that he's accepted.
Oh,
he's
no
never
way!
Gonna see her again
No
in his
way!
Life,
No.
And so I think that is one of the most important parts of the movie is that it's like it's not it's it again, like I said, it has written its margins in this archetype, in this kind of fable that the movie is playing with, and it can't, you can't break those rules. You can't break out of that because it would make the whole rest of the thing crumble if it did. Like it would.
Oh, it would. Yeah, and I guess this is where, and because part of the lens that I'm always looking at these films from when we do this, and just in general, is that I'm always kind of, and maybe this is my problem. Maybe I should stop doing this, but I'm always trying to kind of look at. And remember, what really speaks to me, what really works for me as a filmmaker too, not just an audience. And it's not that I'm trying to I want to copy exactly how they did XYZ, but it's kind of really trying to understand so that I can articulate, not just here on a podcast, but of course through the craft, the kind of filmmaking that really works for me, that I really enjoy, because I can't second guess what an audience might enjoy. I can only ever make a film in a way that pleases me, right? And you hope then that it reaches other people. And I think ultimately what it boils down to is that I think I really enjoy. I think film as a medium is generally more effective because there's such limited time and space to this kind of simple story. Focus on tone, and I really like the openness of this, as insofar as it could be interpreted in so many different ways. From as we've already talked about, whether that's the lead character or the relationship maybe between Irene and Driver, where did Driver come from, why is he here, and where is he going? And like you had just mentioned, well, some people may interpret this as that he's going to go back to them. I agree with you. I don't think that that's remotely the case at all. But somebody could think that, and you know what? That's fine. That there are no wrong interpretations. As an audience, interpret till your heart's content and any way you want. I think that the film has kind of told us enough that Driver, as soon as we're in the elevator and he kills the hitman, I think Driver knows that this is something that could never be. I mean, actually, I think he knows from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
There's never a point where we have this great conversation. It's one of the few times that Driver speaks where he's watching television with Irene's son, and we don't see, but he's watching some kind of like National Geographic thing, and they talk about, the bad, like, how can you tell that's the bad guy? And the kid is like, well, it's a shark. Like, all sharks are bad guys. And Driver's like, you can't have a shark that's a good guy. And he's like, no, come on. The kid, it's like, seems so obvious to the kid. It's like, well, of course not. All sharks are bad. Yeah. And what we really get a sense of is that, of course, what's happening here is that Driver is actually asking, can I be good? Can I ever be good? But what's interesting is that I don't think we ever get a sense that Driver isn't good. Actually, in almost everything that we see, even when he's committing violence or even when he's breaking the law, we never get a sense that he is actually a malicious person or a non-honorable person, right? We never get that sense. And so I think your interpretation of some kind of shame or guilt, it's really what I feel like is that he is shouldering some kind of shame or guilt through his life, and it may not even be warranted, honestly. And this kind of idea of self-punishment, of self-banishment, of forcing himself to kind of go through some wasteland. And I think we all
it's like he has his own coda, like
some
he's
extent.
got his own his creed
and this
that
is
he
why
follows,
these things, and it speaks to us. Look, this film is by no means even remotely the first film to kind of explore this, and you've mentioned several already. But I think all of us kind of we all to some extent exist alone in our own minds, right? And we're all kind of, have this wasteland that at whatever certain points in our life we kind of might find ourselves wondering. I think it's kind of part and parcel of the human condition for most of us, I think. Some to greater, some to lesser extents. But I think that's why this speaks to so many people, even if they don't necessarily specifically articulate it. I think it speaks to something kind of primal. And again, it just goes back to what I love about when cinema really works is that I think it has a way to hit that tone, in a way that I just dig, man.
Yeah. No, totally.
Any other?
It
I mean,
really does.
we did. Yeah, as we get kind of close to the end here, I mean, just a couple of things that I think. Obviously, I want to make sure you had a chance to speak about anything else that you wanted, but we kind of. I just wanted to touch base again. I'd mentioned like Albert Brooks, and I think his performance here is just so exceptional. I think he's such talent. There's a relatively new documentary on Albert Brooks. I think it might be on HBO or Max now. At least here in the U.S., if you've not seen it, I really highly recommend it. I mean, he's such an extraordinary talent. I think he's so good in this. There's such a, he's just, I don't know. It's, without any kind of stereotypical kind of bad guy performance notes, he just nails a character that is just scary as all hell. I feel like so
way
brilliant.
Scarier than Ron Perlman, and I think intentionally so. Like Ron Perlman is the
Ron Perlman is not.
Man.
Ron Perlman is not really like the bad guy here. No. At all. And just so mad props to Albert Brooks. He's just wonderful here. And everything from like shaving off his eyebrows, which I didn't even notice the first time I saw the film, but then on subsequent viewings, I was like, "Whoa, wait a minute! He doesn't have any freaking eyebrows." But just not that that's the extent of his performance, not even close. But just the way that he, there's a couple moments that are just so chilling, like the way he kills Cranston's character, just so matter-of-factly, but with like almost like with mercy and kindness. I mean, it's like this.
Yeah, and he's like,
mix,
it's like he's
right?
still a friend of his. He's like, it's done. It's fine. You're done. Like it's
and it's just. And I think maybe that's actually, it's like we can understand when somebody acts out of violence, out of fear, out of anger, out of greed, out of just some kind of inherent evilness or maliciousness. But it's like when somebody is behaving so violently, and it's like they're so calm and cool and even like kind in the delivery of it. I feel like that scrambles our brains, and we're like,
well, and it's this whole other side of this movie too, like we've been talking about, where it's just like it's in their nature. can you change someone's nature or something's nature in the scorpion, or you can change the shark's nature, And I think it goes beyond, I think that conversation with the kid too goes beyond the shark being evil or bad, but I think the complexity that kind of lands in the middle there is just that it's not that the shark's evil, it's not that it's bad, it's just that it's in its nature, right? It's
just that it's a shark.
The
it's a
shark
shark.
to not eat is
Right, absolutely. To expect the scorpion to not sting is to go against all nature, right?
Yeah,
and that's where then to get mad or frustrated at that, and that's kind of the point of that old little story, right? Is that how in the world can you get mad at a scorpion for stinging you? You're the idiot, not the scorpion, But and we've talked a little bit about the soundtrack. Of course, I find it's such a perfectly integrated soundtrack, and like I said, it literally opened my mind to a whole genre of music that I really hadn't known, and that I still enjoy to this day. So that's pretty rare for me that a film will actually introduce me to a whole scene of music, that I hadn't even been aware of. So I'm grateful for the film in that respect. But any other thoughts or anything else that we hadn't touched on that you'd like to touch on before we wrap up here?
No, not particularly. No, I think that pretty much covers it all. I think we touched on pretty much everything.
Yeah. The only other thing that I did want to kind of I think we did. I think we talked about the car chases and how did we talk about the car chases? I was just kind of fascinated and it's almost like a trolling, and it's kind of funny where it's called Drive. Yeah. It's called Drive. We touched on this a little bit, but the marketing emphasized the car chases and everything. But then when you actually get into the film, it's like the action is actually very sparse. The car chases are by far and away the least interesting part of the film. We talked about that. I think a key lesson here though. Is to if you can keep the marketing department or whoever's marketing your film on a short leash if you can. And I think it's so key to I think audiences don't do very well with the bait and switch, and it's interesting that an audience you don't change the film at all, but you change the expectations, and you can have an audience love the film or you can have an audience hate the film, and it's the same film. But because you set expectations up one way or the other and you don't meet those expectations, even though it could be a great film, it could be devastating to the performance of that film. But thankfully, I think it's found, obviously, an audience, and it was still pretty successful. But just something to, even if you're doing your own marketing for your own projects, it might be tempting to want to put all of the, flashiest, fanciest scenes in there. But expectations, setting expectations are pretty key. Anyway, all right. Well, that about wraps it up for our conversation on Drive. As always, man, it was a pleasure. I totally enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Even though I'm a little sick, I'm glad I made it through. It was touch and go there for a minute when we were in preparation. I was I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it, but I did, and I'm glad. All right, man. Well, I look forward to your pick next time. And thank you, everybody out there, for listening. As always, we really appreciate you, and we'll catch you guys on the flip side.
Bye.